Good evening, Stephen. Was this completely out of the blue?
Complete shock, Mark, to be honest with you. Many of the journalists, the political lobby in Dublin had been in the building, in government buildings and in the Dáil Leinster House all morning preparing for some proposed new recommendations on assisted dying, and the usual gossips and coffees were being had. There wasn't a whisper of this coming down the tracks, really. And looking back, Leo Varadkar had been under a bit of pressure recently, political pressure. A number of his sitting TDs from his party, the members of the Irish Parliament, had announced that they weren't putting themselves forward for a re-election. That number had now reached 10, which is quite significant when you consider he only had 33 elected at the last election, and that was enough for him to form a coalition government with. So basically almost a third of his sitting TDs had in recent weeks announced that they weren't going to sit again or to run again for Fine Gael. That was always going to ask questions of the leadership and the faith that the backbenchers have in the leadership here. And then earlier this month, as you alluded to just there in your introduction, Leo Varadkar suffered really what could only be described as a humiliating defeat in twin referendums designed to amend the Irish constitution. Prior to that, no one thought the government was going to lose. They didn't just lose, they were absolutely trounced at the ballot box. One of those referendums suffered a 74% no vote. That is massive. That is the largest no vote in the history of Irish referendums since independence. So really, the mood music was bad for Leo Varadkar, but at the same time, with local and European elections just 7 weeks away, nobody had really considered the possibility. There was no whisper of a heave within his own party to prompt such a dramatic move. As you say there, it was essentially a mystery midday press conference, hurriedly called. The lid was kept on it extremely well, and seasoned political hacks were taken by surprise when it started to emerge that Leo Varadkar was intending to step aside. He said for political and personal reasons, but he didn't really go into much granular detail about what they were. When on the political side, he definitely alluded to the fact that he thought that loyal friends and colleagues would stand a better chance of election under a new leader and a new Taoiseach, and that is something that those backbenchers had possibly privately come to the same conclusion a good few weeks ago. But we didn't really expect Leo Varadkar to take that on board to the extent to which he did. And he also mentioned personal reasons without really going into much detail. But reading between the lines, he has alluded to the toxicity of modern politics and the sort of abuse, personal and online abuse, that many politicians face, not just here in Ireland, but in the UK and further afield as well. He didn't go into that much detail about what the personal reasons are, but he did say it was a mixture of political and personal reasons. But essentially, he departed without taking any questions from the press, and nobody is truly the wiser as to the exact reason behind this sudden and dramatic move from a Taoiseach who's always acted on his own terms, quite abruptly sometimes.
Yeah, and briefly, Stephen, who are the main contenders to potentially replace him?
Probably 4 or 5 realistic front runners. Among those, a senior cabinet minister called Simon Harris. He's another Fine Gael young gun. He's just 37 years old. Leo Varadkar, of course, was 38 when he became Ireland's youngest ever Prime Minister or Taoiseach. He is currently Minister for Higher Education, so things like universities, third-level colleges, but he came to prominence as Health Minister during the COVID pandemic. Another Simon Coveney will be well known to UK viewers in his previous role as Minister for Foreign Affairs, credited with steering Ireland's diplomatic efforts to avoid a hard border in the post-Brexit era. We have somebody like Helen McEntee as well, who's been touted for years as potentially the first female leader of Fine Gael, maybe ultimately Ireland's first ever female Prime Minister, but her political stock has slipped somewhat in recent months after a series of missteps. And then you have a Leo ally, Paschal Donoghue. He used to be Finance Minister, he's now Minister for Public Expenditure. He had his eye on the directorship of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C. That looks like it may have slipped away from him, so possibly this might be his next big political move. But if you take a look at the bookies this afternoon, it does look as though the smart money might go towards Simon Harris. But as of yet, none of those names have confirmed or denied whether they're actually going to formally put their names into the ring.